Hi everyone, I'm Kaius with a K. In my last video I talked about a Fire Emblem fighting game concept I'd worked on, and in that video I covered the game mechanics and about half the roster. The TLDR of the former is that it's a 2-on-2 fighter that makes use of pair-up mechanics and assists, and follows pretty traditional anime fighter traditions, like having air dashes and explosive air combos. Though a few people argued that a Fire Emblem fighting game would likely be something more similar to Samurai Shodown or Soul Calibur, I don't really see it. Maybe in theory, but Fire Emblem characters and animations are pretty out there, especially nowadays. That's not to say that these franchises are modest in that regard. My Soul Calibur main is a beefy golem dude who uses opponents as a lawnmower, but I didn't feel like I could do certain characters justice in those games' engines. Plus, I'm more familiar with that kind of game and I'm therefore more interested in talking about it. It's my video, and I get to choose the obscure topics. As an aside, also in my last video, I felt my prose behind describing the playable characters wasn't consistent. I would jump between speaking in present tense and a more subjunctive mood, so this time I'll be speaking in present tense as much as I can with character descriptions. This is because it allows me to format each character description like I'm presenting a character mini beginner's guide for them, which not only improves the immersion aspect, but it also lets me write and narrate in a way that I would personally consider more natural. By the way, if you haven't watched my last video on this subject, I implore you to do so, because I'm not going to go over a whole lot before jumping right into this one, since I'm going to assume that you've watched the first part. Lastly, you could have watched this video early if you attended EmblemCon 2023. If you are an attendee and you're watching this right now, hi. So before I go any further, I want to address some mechanical changes that I made between the writing of my last video and the writing of this one. When going over the video again in post-edit, I kinda realised that in a scenario where one of the members of your team is out for the count, the other is pretty much shit out of luck. So to offset this, I decided to add another new mechanic, a comeback mechanic. When you only have one character left on your team, press the assist and switch buttons together to activate Transcendence. When in Transcendence, the following universal effects occur for 25 seconds. You take 35% less damage from all sources, your meter cap is increased and you consistently generate meter and HP slowly, you gain access to EX versions of your supers, you can jump cancel out of all normal attacks on hit or block, and you can cancel specials into EX specials or EX specials into supers or EX supers. In addition to these standardized uniform buffs, every character also gains a unique buff that complements their playstyle. To save you from listening to me ramble about all of them, I'll put all of the unique buffs belonging to characters featured in the previous video on screen. As for the characters in this video, I will be talking about their Transcendence passive when I cover them individually. Also, before I started working on this part, I wanted to seal the deal with this concept by giving it a name. It actually took me a while to come up with the name, and for a while I decided that calling it Fire Emblem Tempest Arena would be apt. However, I ended up applying an unnecessary level of critical thought and realised that in a timeline where this game actually existed, if someone wanted to search for tech on Twitter, they would use hashtag #Feta. This tag would almost certainly lack tips, but it wouldn't lack toes. Yeah, I'll see myself out. As a way to offset this, I settled on Tempest Coliseum instead, but that felt like a bit of a mouthful, so I eventually landed on Tempest Duel. And here's a fancy logo to go along with it. Bam. I say fancy, but this took me like 5 minutes. This will be on the test. Enjoy!
As long as I am with you, we will never lose. I wish to continue fighting at your side.
I didn't forget Marth, he's here, look, he's got the blue hair and the pronouns, he's exactly how you love him. Admittedly, beyond the first 6 characters I showed in my first video, The others were picked out of a hat from my concept list, which is why some of the choices felt very haphazard, and also why I alluded to characters I didn't actually end up talking about in that video. Marth isn't a character who falls under that, but he's still a character who's hard to leave out. Marth is, as expected, a character who works best at the mid-range with decent neutral and good damage. However, where Marth truly shines is in the counter game, and I don't mean in terms of raw counter hits. Marth has a unique set of special moves inspired by the counter series of moves from Super Smash Bros., which can lead to a variety of situations if the opponent hits into it. This could be a raw hit, a multi-directional command grab, or any of his special or super moves. In other words, while his offensive momentum game is limited, he excels at turning a defensive situation into a highly advantageous one. This isn't his only method of turning the tides though, as his kit is built around complementing this, between his quick movement speed and, of course, his tipper mechanic. Tipper might sound similar to its interpretation in Smash, but in execution it's actually kinda different, just a little bit. First of all, tippers will always put the opponent in the counter hit state if they land, but if they hit as a counter hit, they'll put the opponent in a binding counter state. A state that is unique to Marth, which extends the duration of hit stun. When tippers land mid-combo, they will always put the opponent into the binding state, meaning you can chain hits together. Additionally, if you hit a projectile with a tipper, you'll actually reflect it back, turning it into a projectile similar to the one in Lodestar Rush, meaning Marth can reliably use reversals at any point in the screen if precise enough. Marth's Transcendence passive, Lodestar Stance, makes it so tippers and counter hits will always put the opponent into the binding counter state, and his heavy normals will launch a projectile as if he had reflected one. Marth is a hard to use but ultimately satisfying to pull off character whose decent mid-range and phenomenal reversal game can turn precarious situations into a flashy comeback. His main inspirations were Geese Hillard from The King of Fighters and Mai Natsume from BlazBlue. And also the binding mechanic was kind of inspired by Enkidu's Havoc mechanic, just a little bit.
If I get strong enough, I'll be able to split a tree in half with just one swipe of my blade!
Remember when I said that Lyn wasn't the fastest character in the game? Well, here you go. Since Mia and Lyn have a pretty similar game plan of just getting in and going ham on the opponent, it could be pretty easy for me to just detail that game plan a second time, but that's not to say they're identical or semicolons or whatever. For example, Mia has no long range projectile and focuses more on playing up front, often opting to turn a close range neutral in her favour rather than looking for openings to rush in. Part of this is because she lacks threatening long range options. Her only projectile is a wave that travels about halfway through the screen. With its decently high minimum damage, it makes sure that Mia's combos are consistent in regards to their juggles and high damage. With that said, even though her minimum damage is high on certain moves, she does have a low damage ceiling than the rest of the cast, meaning she has to reset her pressure often, especially if she's in a scenario where she can't make use of assists. Along with her standard attacks and specials, other notable features of her kit include a command spot dodge, which can be turned into a command forward or backdash depending on the direction held, a pretty standard DP, and aerial attacks which can change her aerial velocity and momentum, allowing for scary mix-ups that more than make up for the fact that she doesn't have the tools necessary for a standard high-low mix-up. Mia's Transcendence passive, Astra, creates an after image which performs all of her movement and attacks shortly after she does, allowing her combos to be twice as effective. While more on the technical side, Mia's far-reaching mobility, variable movement, and fast attacks make her a formidable ally and a scary foe who's satisfying to learn and eventually master. Mia's key inspirations were Linne from Under Night in Birth, and Ibuki from Street Fighter 3.
I'll let you live. At least, for now. To me, you're nothing!
It's difficult to place what kind of playstyle Julius has at first glance. Is he a zoner with his large normals, a set play character with his consistent vortex, or maybe a puppet character with access to the Dead Lords? Well, the answer is simultaneously all and none of these. It's much more apt to describe Julius as an area control character. Julius is slow in every sense of the word. He walks slow, has lower jump velocity than the rest of the cast, a forward dash instead of a run, and he has an air dash which is considerably more telegraphed than those of everyone else. But that's fine, because if played right, you shouldn't really need to be in a situation where his movement options matter. Julius's key appeal is that he forces the opponent to play his game. With large normals and his key mechanic, the Deadlord summons, Julius should be in control of the screen at all times when he has the advantage. You'd be forgiven for thinking that the Deadlord summons are puppets, like Jenny's Invoke, but Jenny has control over her Invoke soldier, whereas Julius doesn't have control over the Deadlords. The Deadlords, when summoned, follow a predetermined course of action. They slowly approach the opponent, and when they're in range, will perform all 3 moves in a specific sequence, depending on the heaviness of the button pressed to activate the special move. The EX version of this move allows Julius to have the moves performed in a specific order by pressing buttons in the desired order during the startup animation. He has access to 4 of the Deadlords: Bovis, Draco, Canis, and Porcus. Only 2 can be out on the field at one given time, so for Julius's pressure to be consistent, he needs to make sure to space his own pressure and the Deadlords' pressure to create extremely scary mix-up situations where the opponent doesn't actually know what's a stagger and what's safe to push against. This is easier done than said too, as, again, Julius's buttons are fucking huge. Julius's Transcendence passive, Lurking Avarice, makes it so that all 4 of his Deadlords can be on screen at once, and that their attack cycles will occur twice instead of once. Julius's key inspirations are Nero Chaos from Melty Blood, yes that's how it's spelled, and Nappa from Dragon Ball FighterZ.
Helping you is to our mutual advantage. That is all.
In earlier stages of conceptualization, Soren was actually going to be Morgan due to his love of setting traps, but I think Soren emphasizes the strategic element of a trap setting character more, you know, despite Morgan being the son of a tactician. Soren is a set play trapping based character who sports long range albeit weak normals, fast movement options, and has the ability to leave marks on the ground and air behind him as he travels around, all in thanks to his wind magic. These marks are called Sage Snares, and they activate a trap when stepped on by the opponent's point character, keeping them locked in hit stun for a short period. Due to all wind magic and Tempest Duel being air unblockable, both his magic normals and his snares combine to give him a kit that excels at keeping the opponent locked down. Though he does have his downsides of course, such as his low damage, low health, lack of tools for getting out of pressure, and the Sage Snares disappearing when Soren is hit, or when the snares themselves are hit by the opponent or their assist. Though this counterplay requires a decent amount of commitment from the opponent, and due to Soren's long range normals it's not difficult for him to punish these attempts, even if the punish wouldn't be hugely damaging. His assist moves would involve setting these traps, allowing him to give other characters a degree of pressure when they otherwise wouldn't have any. His Transcendence passive, Flare, forces the counter hit state whenever the opponent is trapped in a snare. Soren, all in all, is a long range trap setting set play character whose frailty is made up by his ability to effectively control the pace of the match by mixing up the opponent and keeping them locked down for extended periods of time. His main inspirations are Byakuya from Under Night and Birth, and Testament from Guilty Gear X2.
Could you trust someone, even knowing they may betray you?
Edelgard is what we in the fighting game community call Unga Bunga. In layman's terms, that's a character who gets in by whatever means necessary, starts swinging, starts comboing, and doesn't ever stop for anything ever. In layman's terms, this means that she is essentially pretty friendly to people who want to hit buttons. Again, not that there's anything wrong with that playstyle. Edelgard's key combos are short, but sweet, with high damage and very good corner carry. And her high health pool and decent defensive options allow for her to get more than enough chances to get in and deal damage, even if her approach options themselves, including her rushdown and aerial attacks, aren't anything to write home about. This ability to deal massive damage from short interactions is helped even further by her break mechanic. When Edelgard lands specific attacks at specific points or in specific spots or distances, the enemy becomes rattled, staying in hit stun for longer than usual, and negating a decent chunk of the follow through Edelgard's previous attack animation had, allowing her to cancel into basically anything. Her specials and supers mostly consist of short range attacks that exist to bookend these long strings. As you could imagine, this makes up for her movement driven shortcomings and also makes her an extremely threatening solo presence, meaning she's a bit more of an anchor oriented character than most. Edelgard's Transcendence passive, Raging Storm, allows her to activate break in situations where it wouldn't activate normally by spending meter. Moves triggered this way deal more damage. In other words, she's even more of an anchor character when left to her own devices. Her main inspirations are Azrael from BlazBlue and Leo Whitefang from Guilty Gear.
There are so many people here from all walks of life working together. It's pretty much my ideal spot.
Claude is Tempest Duel's core charge character. Rather than fight opponents head on, he instead opts to control the pace of the battle through tactically playing the long game and employing mind games. While he can be played like a standard charge character with a charged fail not projectile and a flash kick type move, Claude's kit tends to really shine once employing his fake vulneraries, which are placed with a negative edge input, aka holding and letting go of a single button. Fake vulneraries float downward from the air and do not deal damage to opponents who touch them. Rather, when Claude strikes them with a charge move or super, they'll explode, finally damaging opponents and sending them upward. When planned out meticulously alongside Claude's bread and butter combos, this can lead to very long, very explosive combos and an extremely satisfying payoff that makes you really feel like you pulled off a successful scheme. To set up his game plan more meticulously, as well as to use his charge moves in the air more consistently, Claude also has access to his Wyvern. This is a stance change that allows Claude to use standing moves in the air for a few seconds by standing on top of his Wyvern. Claude's main issue is that he's incredibly susceptible to eating huge damage if played improperly, which is thankfully offset by his Transcendence passive, Fallen Star, which reduces the amount of damage Claude takes in the counter hit state by 50%. Claude is a charge character with a small kit that features lots of depth and synergy to it. Because of this, he's deceptively technical and versatile, and his execution is among the higher echelons of the roster. His main inspirations were Batista from Under Night and Birth, and Yukari from Persona 4 Arena Ultimax.
Whoever gets in the way of me and my business partner is asking for a mannequin uppercut on the house.
Now this is one of the reasons I needed a new logo for this concept. Anna is, as is Fire Emblem tradition, a completely new, completely different Anna from those featured in previous games. In the case of this Anna, her outfit is inspired by various fighting game characters and martial arts movies, as well as engages martial masterclass to keep the design from straying too far from Fire Emblem. She's a wandering merchant who travels from place to place, selling wares in one place before disappearing to the next to search for worthy foes. Or more likely to find a new place to turn a quick profit. Anna is the closest thing Tempest Duel has to a joke character, though perhaps saying so would be severely underestimating her, as she's pretty competent in her own right. Her normals are fast, but have shorter range than the average normal, partially due to the fact that Anna uses arts instead of a weapon, though her heavier normals do help to bring the opponent closer to her. Besides having a traditional reversal in her mana keep punch and an easy to use Rekka, Anna sets herself differently from the rest of the cast by her kit-defining move, Convoy. There were a few item character enjoyers in the comments who I can only imagine are popping off right now. This move has Anna briefly pull a hammer space sack from her side, and she pulls a random item out of it. The item is thrown and lands on the ground rather than being used automatically. Some will help, some will hinder, and some will be absolutely fucking insane. The item belongs to the first player to touch it once it hits the ground, though if there's some distance between the players it will land closer to Anna. The EX version brings out 3 items at once, and Anna also has a super which brings out several more items. Some items included are a vulnerary, which heals a small amount, a tonic, which reduces a random stat, and horse manure, which inflicts the silence status. My personal favourite item of hers is Braidableak, which in itself is a random move, as whoever touches it is assisted by a random hero. These heroes include non-playable characters or non-playable versions of otherwise playable characters. For example, Gatekeeper, who summons a battalion, Embla, who disables the pair-up gauge, or Katria, who brings the rest of the White Wings in for a triangle attack. I would be here forever explaining Anna's entire kit, so here's a list of items summoned from the convoy. Every single one of these items is a reference to something in the Fire Emblem series, so see if you can pinpoint them all. In the end, the individual effects don't matter too much, since Anna just wants to fill the screen with as much shit as possible and throw in as much uncertainty as possible to essentially overwhelm the opponent, which is helped by the fact that she's guaranteed to throw an item with an actual hitbox alongside of the special item. Her Transcendence passive, Make a Killing, greatly increases Anna's odds of receiving a powerful item from the convoy, and doubles the amount of the items and accompanying projectiles received. Anna is a very quintessential item character, and originally she was going to use a gold resource to use her moves, which means her early kit traces back to characters like Senko, but in the end, she ended up more like Faust from Guilty Gear and Teddy from Persona 4 Arena. And Nekoark from Melty Blood. Speaking of people wanting your support and or money, if you're enjoying this video, please subscribe and maybe join Case Club R so I can keep making videos like this.
Don't you worry. If anyone's mean to you, I'll beat him up like boom, bam!
TK starts off as a fairly standard small body character. She has decent buttons, a short range projectile, a standard health pool, and an easy to understand flowchart. In essence, she's nothing special. That is, until her Dragonstone meter fills. Over the course of the match, Tiki's Dragonstone meter will slowly fill up, taking roughly 15 seconds to fill when she's the point character, and 30 seconds when she's not tagged in. Of course, this number fluctuates if you tag in or out during that period, and the meter itself pauses when she's using an assist move. When you have a full meter, and I mean a full super meter, as it costs more than any other super in the game to use, you can use Tiki's Transform super. This super, as it would imply by its name, transforms Tiki into her dragon form. This is an install super, it's literally a dragon install, get it? When in this state, Tiki moves faster, hits harder, has super armor, and generally gets more crazy effects on her moves and assists. Depending on the button Tiki uses to activate her super, she gains different effects. With the light version, she uses Breath of Fog. Breath of Fog makes her special moves have third effects, which greatly improve her ability to juggle opponents. There's also the medium version, Dark Breath, which makes her new super armor effects invulnerable to highs and lows at the cost of being stuffed by heavy attacks. And finally, Breath of Flame, which bolsters her overall damage from all attacks. Her Transcendence passive, with Everyone, makes Tiki take 50% less damage in her dragon form. Tiki's main inspirations were Sol Badguy from Guilty Gear and Sun from Marvel vs. Capcom 2, to an extent.
I'll do everything you command, but only so I can get back home to Hoshido faster.
Saizo is the game's squishiest character, but he's also one of the game's hardest hitting. This might sound like a standard pro and con, but these are two very important parts of his game plan. Saizo is fast, has long combos, and is somewhat hard to hit, and his special moves reflect this. They're very, very fast moves that can lead to long juggle situations, or, in one case, a shuriken throw that doesn't really do much of anything. Most of his kit at first might seem very flimsy with its fast animations and low damage, though this seems to sort of stabilise as the match continues. The more damage Saizo takes, the more damage Saizo deals. It's a game plan that sounds very standard at first, with high risk, high reward elements. However, when things get critical, well, so does he. When under 30% HP, Saizo activates Pyrotechnics. When in Pyrotechnics, Saizo gains the following benefits. He takes 30% less damage, his moves gain explosive properties granting them additional hits, and in general they deal significantly more damage than usual. His supers gain additional damage and flourish as well. There isn't a whole lot to say about Saizo's kit because the game plan mostly speaks for itself. When in Transcendence, Saizo gains access to Poison Strike, which makes his pyrotechnics attacks deal damage over 10. If you like the idea of Saizo's game plan, my main recommendation is Yang Xiaolong from BB Tag, but in a universe where Lucario's ore mechanic in Smash wasn't terrible, I would also recommend Lucario from Smash Bros.
So many strong fighters gathered from across the realms. It seems I won't be bored here.
Nyla plays aggressively, able to switch between two playstyles at ease. She's got high mobility, short range, and has high minimum damage with a fair bit of scaling to balance it out, which makes her difficult to optimize compared to some other characters. Some of Nyla's special moves will transform her into her wolf form partway through, which will change her entire moveset in turn. Her wolf form is faster, hits harder, has a shorter hitbox, and is generally more versatile offensively, but she cannot block when in this form, and the form is tied to a Laguz meter that's displayed at the bottom of the screen. When this runs out, Nyla reverts back to her humanoid form. The Laguz meter charges slower after running out, so managing this resource is extremely important to her kit, though it does recharge faster when she isn't your point character, so swapping her out after she loses her wolf form is a decent band-aid fix approach if you run out on accident. Also, her Transcendence passive, Form Shift, makes it so that the Laguz meter doesn't drain, which is admittedly one of the stronger Transcendence effects in the game, but it feels good to let loose and go crazy on opponents. If you like the sound of Nyla, play Valkenhayn from BlazBlue. I don't really have a lot to say about Nyla because I feel like her general gameplay is pretty easy to explain. She's basically Valkenhayn from BlazBlue.
I used to think the path to mastering the sword is a lonely one. I'm glad for the opportunity to hone my craft.
Introducing the final non-bonus character on the roster, Long Ku. Long Ku is a relatively fast mid-ranged character. He has the tools available to poke well in neutral, play defense, or rush down. His buttons have decent range and do very high minimum damage at the cost of being pretty high commitment. Additionally, Long Ku is somewhat lacking in regards to anti-air options, as his reversal is a horizontal one, which is also pretty punishable. As such, Long Ku wants to focus on making sure he can reset neutral as often as possible, rather than waiting for holes in the opponent's pressure whenever possible. Instead of a high amount of combo routes, Long Ku focuses more on punishing openings with single decisive attacks or shorter strings. This patience is encouraged by his special moves, the most prevalent in his kit being attached to charge inputs, meaning he has to actually wait to expose weaknesses in his opponent's game plan. Considering his very high damage, especially on counter hit, having to play patient is a fair trade-off, though assists can help him to open up the opponents faster, which makes him a bit more reliant on support than most characters. His movement options are decent enough, meaning that he can escape pressure situations if his assist gambit pays off, or if the opponent does end up having a hole in their pressure if you're in the corner. Long Ku is a very fundamental feeling character. His decent versatility and huge damage make him able to turtle and completely annihilate health bars when he finally gets an opening. His Transcendence passive, Life and Death, only adds to this by increasing his damage by 35%, but also lowering his defenses by 35%, meaning he is the roster's only character who does not have access to Transcendence's 35% defense boost. Long Ku is inspired by Halomaru from Samurai Shodown and King of Fighters, and the Boxer from Street Fighter, Balrog or M. Bison or Boxer. We're calling him Boxer. Long Ku is in fact the final character in the quote-unquote base roster, but as stated earlier, there are actually two bonus characters. These characters, rather than stick to pure fighting game archetypes and inspirations, are conceptually based on having unique interactions with the game mechanics themselves. Because of this, they are particularly light on the gameplay descriptions compared to other characters.
The path is yours to climb, but I'll help you on your way.
Azura is a character who focuses on the relationship between a point character and an assist character. She effectively feels more like the support character than the actual support character on your team, because she makes sure that the assist is putting in as much work as possible. When in as the point character, Azura gives the assist character a passive buff to their idle healing. When all of their red health has fully recovered, they will begin to recover 10% of their maximum health, which is a slow process, but it's worth noting. Azura's key special move is Sing. When used, the pair up gauge will recover twice as fast until it is full or until an assist is used. The EX version, Inspiring Song, fully regenerates the pair up gauge immediately. Azura has good option coverage in her normals, especially in the air owing to her fast lance swings. However, her slower movement speed and bad reversal options make her require her assists to make her toolset really feel full and cohesive. Due to her reliance on assists, her Transcendence passive, Grey Waves, allows her to continue using assists with no penalty even after she's the only character left on her team. Her most notable parallels are Ako Tamaki from Dengeki Bunko Fighting Climax, with a little bit of Fukua from Skullgirls.
Everyone dies. None can return, and yet I keep trying.
Conversely to Azura, Leaf is a character who excels when on his own. He's a close range character for projectile attack that travels across the ground, a standard DP, and a Rekka special, as well as pretty middling assist potential overall. All in all, he's a strong, well-rounded character with nothing special to him under normal circumstances. However, his Transcendence passive, Deadly Balance, throws all conventional design out the window and effectively turns Leaf into a raid boss. When Deadly Balance activates, Leaf gains the following effects. He takes 40% less damage from all sources, has no meter cap, and is able to use EX and super moves infinitely, while using multiple in a combo will drain Leaf's health. His specials become EX specials, with his actual EX specials being amplified even further to deadly EX specials. He can jump cancel out of all normal and special attacks on hit or block, and he can cancel specials into other specials once per move per chain. The same applies to EX specials. However, Leaf takes damage over time, and his Transcendence does not end through a timer, so Leaf needs to close out the fight fast and cleanly, or else he'll die. Or at least hang at 1 HP. Leaf's key inspirations are X Factor from Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and Pandora from Street Fighter Cross Tekken. These aren't characters, which definitely makes us stick out, but considering X Factor, we can probably just say that he's based on Virgil. We did it! We talked about the full base roster of Fire Emblem Tempest Duel. There's of course a little more to cover in regards to side things, certain fun stuff such as character intros and outros, stages, and a list of songs used for each character in these videos will be included in a set of documents that I'll share once the YouTube version of this video launches. Additionally, other aspects like character colours and a few quote-unquote season passes will be discussed in a part 3 video that will come out sometime over the summer. In regards to those season passes, the plan is like this. The first season of characters will consist primarily of characters I came up with, but the second season will feature entirely characters based on viewer suggestions. So make sure to comment with your ideas or send them in the Case Club Discord or on my Twitter, Case with a K. If you're the shy type, I'll also provide a link to either my Tumblr or a Google form, which will let you talk about your suggestions anonymously if you so choose. Thank you for the warm reception to this series. I have genuinely never felt so proud of my work on YouTube before. I'll be back with more cool stuff soon, but I'm gonna take the next 2 weeks or so off because this project took up so much of my time. Much love to everyone!